Welcome back to another episode of the RLR Podcast. Matt and I have a great show for you this week with some really interesting topics. So I'm going to say let's just go right ahead, dig into this segment we call Recharge. How are you, Matt?
Good. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. I am doing
Happy to be
well.
back for another week. Happy to
Absolutely.
see everybody who's tuning in. I think we
Absolutely.
want to start off this week with a clarification from about our last week's episode, where I think I had mistakenly said that we talked about the Dodge Ram and in terms of like car shows and reveals and pickup trucks and all that. I think I had mistakenly said Dodge Ram had debuted or was debuted in like 1997. That is incorrect. Dodge Ram was actually brought to market, I think, in the 1980s per a user who reached out, or a listener who reached out to us and let us know that. I think that the what we were talking about is more so maybe the second generation debut versus the original Dodge Ram. So that's a little bit of clarification there. But speaking maybe in terms of auto shows, you had something interesting you saw over the past week, right, Nick? With regards to auto shows in the auto market.
Yeah, so something that I saw was NBC, large broadcasting network, national broadcasting. Is it national
National
broadcasting?
Broadcasting Corporation. I don't know,
Yeah, something
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 like that.
along those lines. Anyway, NBC, the Peacock people, as they're known here in the states, based on their logo, have announced a new show with some SNL alum coming to TV.
Hmm.
Called American
Cool.
Auto, which is going to be based around the American auto industry and a satirical look at what's coming with the electric car market and trying to transfer from gas to electric. So I'm pretty
As we
interested
touch on
in.
a little bit, it's an interesting little
Yeah.
change in the market here. There's lots of jokes abound, and maybe goods and bad things as well. So
Yeah,
I'm
it,
looking
it
forward
should
to it. I
it
think
should
it'll
be
be cool.
noted if SNL wasn't a hint enough, it is a comedy.
I can't wait. I think it's gonna be hilarious. Hopefully, I mean,
I hope so too.
SNL's pretty funny. I know it had over the years it's been more funny or less funny, but if you've got some minds from SNL, I think we're in for a good show. Pun intended. With that, I think some congratulations are in order. Moving on from there, something I saw over the past week where SpaceX has been in a little bit of hot water recently. They've I think failed to essentially follow some FAA regulations. So I think with their new Starship rocket, the Mars one, for everybody who doesn't know. So a little bit of good news for SpaceX is they now hold, I believe, a world record for the largest number of satellites launched into space using the same booster. I believe that's the current Falcon 9 that has had, I can't even remember how many successful suborbital flights at this point, but it's yeah, they now hold the record for most satellites launched into space. So let's just good on Tesla for adding to all that space junk, right? All the floating debris around the Earth.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, there's a giant ring of space junk essentially floating around the Earth from all like our old like over the years of the entire world's space organizations, satellites, and old decommissioned satellites and telescopes and whatnot. So it's a little funny, but that's a pretty big feat. Again, they're pioneering SpaceX reusable flight, and good. Can't wait to see what more things come from them. Frankly, obviously, I'm a big fan. With I think goes without saying. So, congrats to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe a little more on the ground here. Moving down is I've always liked Ford trucks. I think that the Ford Raptor is a pretty cool truck. I've never been able to actually drive one as of yet. Hopefully someday I will, but I've been seeing some auto bloggers talk about it and car reviewers, mention it as well. I believe that the new generation Ford Raptor is slated for a February 3rd release. So I don't know about you guys. I'll be tuning in to see if that, of course, that's what I read. I hope that's true. But I'll be tuning in to see what the new generation Ford Raptor looks like and all the specs on it. Maybe we'll talk about that in another episode
As
once
will
we know
I,
more.
especially since they've had a couple trucks starting to come after them. Um,
Oh,
I
especially
mean,
with what the Ram TRX as well.
yeah,
I
the
mean,
Rebel TRX was one.
Rebel TRX.
I mean the Rebel in general was going after the designs, but
Mhm.
um,
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, Ford sat. I would say Ford sat on top with not obviously not only with pickup trucks, normal quote unquote pickup trucks, but when you think of a sports oriented, massively sports oriented pickup truck, what comes to mind? I mean, frankly, the Raptor. I mean that's what comes to
Well,
my mind.
or any of the SVT line from the old F-150
Yeah,
days. I mean, the SVT Lightning was it was a road ready drag strip racing pickup truck.
yeah, yeah. I think that they have held the title, or they've held they've held people's minds, and they have competitors like you said coming for them finally. Trying to knock them down a peg and take some of that market share. So it'd be interesting to see what their new offering is to kind of, well, let's see if they stay on top.
Right. Yeah. Very
Oh,
interesting.
I hate to keep going on and on about this, but I want to talk about something else that I think is pretty cool that not necessarily something over the last week. I did see an article pop up here and there, but I'm a big fan of the B-1 bomber. I always have been, and it's a very, as we both know, a very old airframe. The U.S. Air Force has been, flying B-1 bombers for, I frankly don't even know how long. I could probably find out, see if I have like an article or something to cite here. But the Air Force, I think they're working on a new bomber platform. I think it's supposed to debut. Hadn't you heard about that, Nick? There's like a new B2, or there's a new bomber
There
they're working on essentially, the Air
essentially,
Force,
yeah, there's
but it's
one
not
that's
ready yet.
been in the works for quite a while, and I know they've also been exploring some um,
Yeah.
drone op style um,
I think
bombers
like
thing.
one of them is like a B-21 Raider or something that might like be debuted at the later end of this year. But so essentially, but though the B-1 has been proven in combat and proven in throughout history, and it's a pretty old airframe, and they're going to keep going. So they have, I'm not sure how many the Air Force currently has in their B-1 bomber fleet. Everything that I could find, what I could find looks like they currently have around 62 in their fleet, and they're going to be reducing that to about 45. Cool thing is, with some of the B-1 bombers that they are going to be retiring, they are going to serve as not only parts bins essentially for the other bombers, the other 45 that will remain in service until for who knows how long to keep this platform going. Very frugal of them, right, for these multi-million dollar airframes. But the thing why I bring it up is I found cool is they're going to use the retired bomber airframes, and they're going to do essentially stress testing. They're going to do, I think a lot of these airframes have anywhere from 8,000 to 10,000 flight miles on them, and they're going to use the older airframes to actually essentially stress test to find weaknesses in order to better prep and maintain the 45 they're keeping. So not only are they just going to use them for spare parts, but they're actually going to make sure, continually make sure that these airframes are safe to fly for our the U.S. Air Force aviators. So I think it's pretty cool, pretty useful. It's pretty frugal. I think it's a good. I'm behind the idea. I think it's a good idea as long as 45 quote unquote gets the job done. So you know what I mean. I think it's kind of
Yeah,
cool.
I do.
Something I wouldn't have thought of. I think like in the world of aviation, you generally you use an aircraft until it dies, or you just kind of keep getting new ones instead of really trying to keep an older. And I'm sure there's airworthiness, and I'm sure there's government contracts and software and classify and whatever goes into acquiring a new bomber platform, frankly, right, for the U.S. Air Force. But
right.
it just struck me as something that's pretty cool that, to be honest, with the way the U.S. government spends money on, the defense spending, I wouldn't have expected them to kind of do these kind of things. So I find it really cool, and good on them, frankly, for doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much that can be said about the service life of an aircraft, depending on.
Hmm.
You don't really look on the commercial side. You don't really look at how many hours it has or how many miles it's flown. You look at how many times the air shell has been pressurized and depressurized
Hmm.
because that puts stress on the nuts and bolts that are holding that fuselage together.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I'm reading further into this article by Kyle Mizukami from Popular Mechanics. It looks like when the B1 platforms were originally designed and delivered to the Air Force, they were designed to fly for about 8 to 10,000 hours. But the average number of hours on the bomber fleet right now is 12,000. So they're gonna, I mean, they're already past their prime essentially, and they're gonna keep on making this work. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's essentially like them keeping around the F-18s as well. I know
Hmm.
they're still
Yeah.
making new F-18s, but um, that platform, keeping those alive, keeping that platform alive, or the A-10s for that matter.
Yeah.
The
Talk.
A-10,
Oh, I could go. You know my love for the A10s. I could chat for a
as
while.
you know
But I
mine.
won't today. Yeah, I don't think we do today because we'll go on a super long tangent. But yeah, it's. I mean, I don't know if them being frugal and having to keeping to maintain these airframes is, something of a cost thing, or just waiting for the new ones to take place, or frankly that there isn't anything that serves their purposes better, yet. I don't know. I would argue that may be the case for the A10, but it's cool. It's cool
Yeah,
to see
there's
these
nothing quite else
evolve.
like the A-10, the plane that is built around, not built to carry, not built for, built around a minigun. Now,
Quite literally, it's basically a flying gun
it really is,
in every
and it,
sense of those two words.
and it can take a lot of ground fire
Hmm.
before needing to return for service. So, anyway, before we get off on that tangent, speaking of commercial air travel, now this is the
Hmm.
point where I get to talk.
I'll let you go. There you go.
Delta Airlines is experimenting with a biometric digital ID testing, aka facial recognition. And the idea behind it is less contact with physical people during your interaction in these new post pandemic, well, still in a pandemic, but planning for the post pandemic times.
Hmm.
Everybody's kind of getting used to this touchless curbside delivery, um,
Hmm. Yeah.
this less touch atmosphere. And one of the big things,
Yeah. Was it like no contact anything essentially? We're
essentially
talking
no
about.
contact with anything besides you and the seat you're sitting in. Everything else is handled either in a way where there's no contact, human contact, touch to touch. The big one being this new idea with TSA pre-check, as well as some other things that Delta is putting in place. I believe it's being tested in Detroit right now, which is
Okay.
interesting to see how it's working with the faceplates. Or I'm sorry, not faceplates. I'm looking at next thing on our list. Um, um, with the face masks covering
Oh
people's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
faces, because you do have to uncover your face for that, for the
It's
facial
gonna get
recognition
people
software to
physical,
pick
the
up.
math stuff.
But yeah, so essentially, you walk in, you go through your pre-check. Nobody, essentially, unless you've got something that
Mm-hmm.
the um, TSA is going to notice as not good to have on an airplane.
Yeah, all the
You
all the
know,
normal rules apply.
normal rules apply there, but outside of that, Delta employees, essentially, if you are TSA pre-check, red dress, or I'm sorry, TSA pre-check, red dress, um, or in the fast lane or the fast pass, and you are a Delta Rewards member, then you get access to using the facial recognition technology instead of having to scan an ID or scan a boarding pass or anything else that could potentially cause human to human interaction.
I think it's a good idea because I often wonder. I mean, obviously with the human to human connections, typical flying, how many people end up touching, or how many things end up touching, well, any of your stuff, and like going through, security or whatever, or when you hand over your passport or ID and your ticket at, when you pass at the gate as well. I mean, if a flight attendant has, checks your ticket as well. I mean, you think of how much contact actually goes on when you fly. It's
Right,
kind of terrifying, frankly.
and let's be honest, the gloves on TSA agents are not there to protect you; they're there to protect them.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, and I would imagine that, and I'm not blaming them either. I would imagine that those gloves aren't changed often because, like you said, it's not there to protect other people; it's there to protect them. So those germs still persist, most likely. So I don't know what legitimate TSA regulations and operating procedures, but I would assume that they're not going through gloves, with every person they touch. I haven't frankly seen that, but I'm not saying that they don't. I just don't really
Yeah,
know,
it's been quite a while. In fact, it's been since I know the day. It has been since February 5th of last year, February 5th of 2020, since I've done any kind of commercial air travel.
I
So
too can say the same thing. I know the exact day. My day of last time I did commercial air travel is the very last day is March, I believe March 14th of 2020 when I got home from the last vacation that I took on a cruise, and it was so nice to be in the warm and the sun and the sand.
we'll get back to that soon. Yeah,
For those of
definitely.
us who don't know, we're in the middle of what 6, 7, 8 inches of snow right now, so I'm kind of missing that right now,
Yeah,
frankly.
my measurement just of what was accumulating on top of my car was about 7 inches. So
I don't know about you, I've been shoveling snow and snow blowing snow for pretty much feels like the past day and a half, frankly. I hope it stops soon.
yep, I do too. So
To that point, you want to hit the last topic here on recharge?
yeah, so part of when I said faceplates, I was looking at this. Um, so Tesla engineers and a lot of people have looked at the Tesla data and agreed with from the industry. So Tesla is leading the charge in the removal of the stick shift or the um, gear
Gear selector?
lever, gear selector, anything that you'd think of, the shifter, sticky
Stick
stick, however you
shifter
decide.
sticky stick.
Yeah, you're the one who wrote that in there. Anyway, um, that's and and I'm talking all the different kinds. We're talking standard stick shift. Obviously, has been
Rotary
dying.
dial, all that stuff. I mean, yeah, of
The,
course.
the
Or are we
standard
talking like rotary
transmission,
dial as well?
yeah. So we're talking rotary dial. We're talking push buttons. Everything. What they're saying is people are going to essentially get in the car, set a destination using Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, and the car is going to predetermine and decide what gear you need to be in to get there. So taking the entire
Huh.
thought of, okay, I need to get into drive or I need to put the car in park, they're essentially thinking that the software is going to be
Inventory.
able to do it for you. Obviously, there's going to be a manual override for specific things, but it's going to be done through the new touchscreen in what Tesla is saying is going to be their new minivan. Um, they're going after
Well,
the
I've already seen them get rid of stuff like this too. I think in the new, I don't know what new one, but I could have sworn
the
over the
Model
past week I
Y
saw
does not have
something
a
with like
shifter.
touch. Well, there was this like with turn signals too. I could have sworn that some Tesla model or prototype is doing away with the traditional turn signal stock and doing instead like just touch buttons for turn signals on a screen.
That's
I think.
I haven't seen
I, th-
that, but
I
that's
think it was
extremely
Tesla.
interesting.
I could be wrong, but I don't know if it's Tesla or not. My brain says it's Tesla. I mean, let's be honest. It sounds like a Tesla thing, right? But I mean, I put that in the same category where those I could get behind. I mean, it would definitely be a shift in frankly how I think here we in the states learn to drive, especially like controls that have always been there, frankly, right? But
Right.
I'm not sure how I feel about turn signals. Yes, I can get behind. I'm not sure how I feel about this. Apple CarPlay is wonderful. It's very helpful. I use it all the time when I'm able to. But that said, I don't want Apple CarPlay or car software determining what gear I'm in and doing all of the driving for myself. I know I joke about the iRobot cars of the future. I enjoy driving, not even just for the safety and control of it, but I want to be able to to drive, frankly. And I'm sure they'd figure out the safety and whatever, but it's just not
Aha.
sitting with me very well right now. You know?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I agree. Second of all, I did look it up real quick. It's the new Tesla Model S Plaid. Because what's
Okay.
faster than ludicrous speed, but Plaid? Yeah, it is not coming essentially with a center console. It is not coming with anything but the giant touchscreen, wood grain, and an airplane yoke for a steering wheel. You heard me correctly. It is an airplane yoke steering wheel.
I like that, but I could see that not going over well with a bunch of other
Um, yeah. How do you uphold the hand? I'm looking at the thing right now. At least the pictures of it. There is. How do you teach anybody to drive that? There's nothing that goes across the top for the old-fashioned 10 and 2s, and I know right now they say
I
3 and
always
9s,
hated
but
that. I always hated being told in driver's ed, "Hey, keep your hands at 10." And I was, I think you were too. You know, keep your hands at 10 and 2. I'm like, why? It's more comfortable where I have my hands. Frankly, I
it's
feel like I have more control where
it's
I'm
more
putting my
comfortable where
hands.
you have your hands, or because I've seen you drive before and you've seen me drive before.
Yeah, I mean,
Where I place my hands also depends on how I'm driving, but in a casual setting,
mhm.
they're very relaxed. They're on towards the bottom of the wheel.
Yeah,
I do
agreed.
understand that.
If I'm
What
doing
do
a whole lot
you?
of straight driving, I mean, on the highway and like literally straight road, especially. Yeah, my hands are gonna be kind of like down towards the bottom. I still generally use two hands, but like you said, I'm not gonna keep my hands at 10 and 2 when there's literally open road and it's straight in front of me. I
Yeah,
mean, a straight shot.
but the issue is this thing doesn't have anywhere from, if we're looking at it like a clock, it doesn't have anything from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. How
That's a little strange.
how do you go hand over hand turning when there's nothing to hold on to?
I guess it better be a very short turning radius on that wheel or yoke, rather. I guess it wouldn't even be a wheel anymore, would it?
No, it is. It's definitely not a wheel. I can tell you that right now.
Question
I
is, would they still call it a wheel though? You know what I mean?
um
Like, it's not, but would
no,
they?
they are actually, in fact, there was an article put out by it's the Tesla Motors Club,
Hmm.
official forums on the internet, TeslaMotorsClub.com. Someone by the name of Vegas Blue posted a long thread that I will not get into right now, entitled "A Yoke or a Joke." And quite honestly, I'm leaning towards joke
Joke.
because
I would too.
I really don't understand.
Would
I'm
I wish I
looking.
had a flying car? Yes, of course. Science fiction. I'm not necessarily by that saying I think we need to cross aircraft and road going motor cars.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
don't.
that's
And looking at this thing, I don't even understand how on earth it would work in the first place, let alone. I
so. Here's my
do
question.
understand the idea. Hold on, real quick. I do understand the idea behind not having the top half of the wheel. A lot of people have thought about that before, since it could be adjusted to
Mhm.
block the instrument panel. But
I guess technically that makes sense, but what doesn't that also come down to design with proper designing in the driver's cockpit essentially?
right, and how do you? I mean, I can only imagine because the EU and Britain have much stricter laws about
I
steering
think
wheels
we're
and the
we're
way you
overlooking the
drive.
most important thing here. I mean, the most important thing is at what speed do we take off? What happens when I pull back on the yoke?
80, I wouldn't doubt if it was 88 miles an hour.
Is it doing a wheelie? What
Yeah,
happens if I push forward?
with
Does it
the
start
amount
hopping?
of torque that this thing has, I wouldn't doubt it. Um,
It's definitely something new. I think good on Tesla, and seems like EVs being so new. That's the testing ground, right? I'm not saying it won't work, but along the lines of like with the shifter as well, removal of an actual shift lever of any kind, or gear selector of any kind, besides I guess a touchscreen. I'm all for the future. I don't think I'm necessarily on board with all that quite yet. I'm not 100% comfortable with that just yet.
I cannot say that I am either. Um, I just and every time I look at this thing, it's exactly the same way. I just don't. I'm having. I'm just struggling to take a look at it, and I did just post. Oh, that didn't really work. Hold on 1 second. I do want to post a picture of this so you can see this yoke.
Hmm.
Just because I want to make sure that I'm not crazy in thinking that this thing just doesn't look like it's gonna work.
I love the
Um,
tangent this turned into. What? Oh, for those who are
okay.
listening, I just saw the picture, and that was an honest reaction to the first. What?
Explain to me
Um.
how do you
So here's what I think.
how
It looks like you got some easy left thumb control buttons in the middle, like of the top row, horn slash airbag in the middle, right? And I could see. So here's my immediate thought. This is either going to be the most comfortable thing to use because of maybe how your how it channels your thumbs at maybe like a 3 and 9 kind of thing, where the buttons are, or relaxed driving. It's got like flat bottom, so rest your hands there. It's either going to be that or the most ungodly uncomfortable driving experience I've ever seen. And right now, my money's on the latter.
my money's also on the ladder. Also, I hope you don't have the wheel turned when you go to get in and out because that's gonna crush your knees.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. What happens when you turn the?
Because that's a very
Oh, it's
wide
so
wheel.
wide.
Yeah.
Wow. For those who are listening, go look up online.
It is
What is
the
his name?
Tesla Model S Plaid Plus yoke wheel. That's a mouthful. But I promise you, if you're
Tesla,
looking at
please
it,
do us a favor and make this detachable like a race wheel, and so we can change it out in case we don't like it.
yeah, or if this is the only thing that's coming with plaid, then I don't know. I'm not sold on
Yeah,
it. You know what, Tesla? By all means, if someone from Tesla is listening to this podcast, first of all, thank you. Second of all,
yeah.
I am more than happy for you guys to fly me somewhere warm and give this
Use
thing a
us as
test
guinea
drive.
pigs.
Yeah,
Yep. Hey,
I
take us
would be
both
more than
out. We'll
happy to
do
be
a
proven
review.
wrong. I would be
Yeah,
more
I
than
think
happy.
I've said that. We both said that multiple times on the podcast here. I love being proven wrong. And Tesla, if you want to let us give us a go, well, we'll test it for you, even a prototype.
I
We'll
mean,
test it for you.
speaking of that, I mean, I would love to, like we talked about. I don't know if it was last week or 2 weeks ago, but I would love to test the range on Porsche's Taycan
Oh,
4S. I would love to
100%.
take you up on that. So
Mm-hmm.
hit us up. We're more than happy to travel on your dime. And
Your dime. Hey, if push comes to shove, even our own.
okay, yeah,
You just set it up.
that is actually
We'll
true.
meet you there. We'll meet you halfway.
So
With that, do you wanna head into head into our next segment here? I
I
think that wraps up recharge of the
and then,
last week.
yes, that does wrap up recharge rather nicely. And so let's move on into
Oh man, that feels
F1
good.
news and updates.
So, as I think this might be a primarily me talk session, so I'm sorry, listeners and or viewers on YouTube. But I think maybe we can talk together about some thoughts on the last thing here. Not a whole lot of news so far. We are coming up to not very not soon, but we're coming up to the start of the season. I think it debuts in F1 season starts in I think it's March 26th, if I'm not mistaken, at Bahrain. Am I right with that? I think I'm right with that. Let me,
Yes, you are correct. Sorry, I was
cool. I'm
pulling up
right
the
about
schedule.
something. I'm allowed to be right once a week, so maybe that's this one time. Um, so with that, I think some interesting changes. We've talked about rule changes and power changes, teams and constructors and names and whatnot. Some things we haven't talked about is I think just some more minor things that I saw over the week. F1 published an article talking about the some start time changes for next year. So for those who are avid F1 fans like maybe ourselves, you know that the races always start 10 minutes after the hour, or did last season, essentially. So now I believe they will be starting on the hour, which makes it just a little bit easier to kind of, predict on when things are going to happen. Is That's the Grand Prix, by the way, not everything, frankly. FP 1, 2, 3, qualifying, and so on. So with that, there's also it looks like one thing I didn't know is both FP1 and FP2 have always been generally always traditionally been 90 minutes apiece, right? They have 90 minutes to
Hmm.
practice whatnot and blah 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 and have some fun. But it looks like for this season and onwards, from what I can find in F1's own publishings of their rules and articles and whatnot from their own from Formula1.com, it looks like FP1 and FP2 will be both reduced to 60 minutes, essentially cutting off an hour of their practice time, team's practice time. And I think that's
Interesting.
actually a pretty big deal. I think it's a good move to maybe quicken up. I don't mind the regular 90-minute sessions. I tend to make a Sunday out of it. I watch I record. Well, I record FP 1, 2, and 3, the quals, and I watch those. I watch the pre-show up until the Grand Prix, and then I watch the Grand Prix generally live, unless it's really early in the morning, right?
Sure.
So I think it's a good idea though, especially for some new fans. Maybe getting in and kind of, as we know, it can tend to be long, right? Some of these sessions and whatnot. So I think it's going to be interesting. It's going to give them an hour less time to set up the cars, find what works right. Learn the track and figure out strategies. I mean, that's kind of a big deal, I think. I don't know if we'll see it, but if I was a team, I would think that would be a big thing that they'd be worried about, at least for the first few races, to figure out, how to do their normal, practice session stuff in less time. I'm sure they'll figure it out, by the mid end of the season. But for the first few races, I'm gonna think that's gonna be a big change for all the teams, all the constructors, frankly.
I think it'll be interesting the first, week or so when they're kind of getting used to it. Maybe
Hmm.
2, 3 weeks. I think the older or more experienced drivers on the grid are probably going to have a significant advantage in this case because they're used to the
Hmm.
tracks. By the third or fourth race,
I
they're going to
see.
be getting used to the car. The people who are going to have real issues are the new to F1 drivers who are, you know, still getting used to the car, still getting used to the tracks. I know F2 typically races at all the same tracks F1 does,
Hmm.
but F1's a much more powerful car and a much
Yep.
more powerful setting
It's a
and a
totally different game.
much more high stakes game.
Yep. We'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens. There's a lot of changes. I mean, even the drivers, I think, are going to have to drive differently. Tire changes and all that we talked about before. So there's
Well, right, because
I could
there's
again
tire
very well be
restrictions,
proven
there's
wrong.
fuel restrictions, there's a bunch
Oh,
of
there's different tire
things.
compounds as well. The drivers aren't harder tire compounds that favor it. So there's a lot of things actually that are small things that are changing. And like I said, there a previous episode, I predict that this will be more of a placeholder season until we start seeing more regulations and real changes next year after this year. But I'd love to be proven wrong, frankly. And given how the preseason's has been knocking around with like Hamilton and stuff like that, I might be proven wrong. I'm looking forward to being proven wrong, frankly.
Yeah, well, and I agree. I mean, I agreed with you that this season would probably be kind of the next placeholder season. I was excited for a couple of things. I'm still excited for a couple of things, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I think still no less excited to watch, right? I mean, I put it that way. I'm still looking forward to debut of the season. If anything, I'm going to watch all of,
oh yeah,
or as
absolutely.
many as I can, frankly.
I 100% agree.
Well, with that, I think I haven't heard anything about Hamilton's contract negotiations. Have you? I haven't seen anything official yet. More
Nope.
kind of back and forth, frankly. So nothing to report about Sir Hamilton's contract negotiations. Will or won't he have a seat at Mercedes or in Formula One for this upcoming season? Who knows?
The real
There was a.
question is, will the W12 be released before we know who's
I was
driving it?
just gonna say that.
Okay.
Will Mercedes debut their new car without the driver, without both their drivers? I think that they will. Frankly, I don't think that whatever's going on, if they haven't figured it out by now, I don't think we're gonna see it. For at least a few more weeks. The end goal of these contract negotiations or news. So, with that, I think we're gonna see a lot of teams come out with their cars. Obviously, their new cars for this year. Mercedes, I don't think I've seen a release date for the W12. Ferrari, I haven't heard, frankly, from anybody else in terms of a release date, frankly, besides McLaren. The MCL 35M, which is their new car, essentially, they will be releasing that. I think more so the car and specifically the livery on February 15th. So I'm not aware of any other official debut dates for F1 teams, but
I
so
don't know if
far
there's
we have
anything else that's
McLaren.
been official yet. However, we do know that the W12, at least it was being said, will be released at some point after the McLaren. Excuse me, but
And before
before
Ferrari.
Ferrari.
And how much we don't yet know when Ferraris is technically officially going. So
Right.
at least from what I've seen, I could have missed something, but pardon me.
No, I'm not.
Oh,
I'm
my
really not
yawn has
seeing
come on.
anything out of the Tifosi right now. So
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens. If we see more, we'll make sure we make you guys aware if we catch more of these debut dates. But for now, we have the McLaren one coming up here on the 15th. I'm looking forward because they're one of my more. I'm behind them for this year. I like what they were able to accomplish last year, and with their new driver lineup with Ricciardo as well. I think we're going to see some big things out of McLaren this year. Frankly, I think so. Frankly, so with that, I think the last thing that I want to point attention to is maybe not more so a discussion, but we know that Mick Schumacher has one of the spots at Haas for this upcoming season, and Mick
yeah,
Schumacher being the son of Michael Schumacher, the shall we say, very famous for good reason race car driver, very good at what
yeah,
he does or did. And Mick is now forging his own path in racing, obviously through the ranks and now coming to F1, not just I would say riding his father's coattails, right? And there's an interesting
yeah,
article that I want to point listeners to from F1 Formula1.com. It essentially, just I gotta be honest, I don't know much about him yet, and I'm interested to learn more. And it was an article published by Chris Medland about essentially an interview with Mick, talking about like where he lives, what he thinks about racing. Apparently, one of the things in here is his favorite lesson at school was sports, which is awesome. And if he wasn't a race car driver, what did he say he was going to do? If you were not a racer, what would he be? He said, and I quote from the article, "I've never really thought about it, but maybe working with the traffic police or something like that. I think that would be interesting, and I'd still get to be very near to speed patrolling the highway." So it sounds like even if he couldn't be a race car driver, clearly there's still speed in his blood, which I find that traffic cop thing a little interesting. But that might be kind of cool. So I gave it a read. It's worth a read, I think, as well to get to know Mick a little bit better. But it's on Formula1.com. The article was written by Chris Medland, and the title of it is quote Getting to know Mick Schumacher, the new Haas driver on his motorsport hero alternate career and more. I thought it was a pretty nice thing, pretty well done, Frank. I'm looking another reason, to things to look for in the off season. I'm not sure if you
yeah.
have any thoughts or on that, Nick, but just want to
I'm
point that out
I'm
for people.
excited for Mick. I am still thoroughly disappointed with everything else that has happened with Haas in the off season. However,
It's been a little rough, yes,
Mick is that
shall we say?
little shining light in the corner that's like, okay, we can still do this, guys. We're
Yep.
holding it together.
I think Mick will be in F1, barring of course performance this year or whatever. I think Mick will be in F1 for quite a while, and maybe not always on the hot team. I think he might be picked up by some less maybe some more constructors contending teams. Frankly, I'd love to see Haas get there. Maybe he can help lead them there. But for now, there's only about a few teams that are really constructors contenders, and Haas isn't one of them right now, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
we'll see. it's his debut. We'll see what he can do, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's all I have for F1 news. Do you want to stroll on in and maybe do a little bit more detailed chat here?
Yeah,
Paddock chat?
let's move on to paddock chat.
I think first up, to maybe go more in depth and give our, or, more thoughts on this GM's announcement that they, I think, what, by 20, was it 35? They
2035.
want 2035, they will no longer be producing internal combustion engine cars, essentially going all electric, right? From what I read.
Yes, I believe it's either all alternative energy or all um, electric vehicles.
I'm reading more from this article written by who just says the Associated Press, but they have it says General Motors has set a goal making the vast majority of produces electric by 2035, and the entire company carbon neutral, including operations 5 years after that. That's a pretty heavy undertaking, I think.
Yeah, that
I
is.
think if anything with GM, I mean GM the behemoth, it's one thing for like we talked about it, I think for 2 weeks in a row now, right? With states or agencies or organizations, companies making these announcements, but when you have a behemoth like GM, you know, not necessarily your lonely state here, right? I mean it's a gigantic company, frankly. So that's a pretty big deal. The fact that they're going to go carbon neutral essentially what by 2040 everything by 2040 it sounds like, and primarily electric production by 2035. I
So
know that's what, like 15 years out, but that's not even that long, frankly, right? I mean, that's a big move.
yeah, and that begs the question, Matt.
What?
What's gonna happen to the Corvette?
Don't bring it up.
uh, you know, I mean, what we've
Well,
essentially
I,
just
I
been
think that
told.
I think that kind of just solidifies that. I mean, if the Corvette continues to exist, which I would hope that GM would not, you know, get rid of, a namesake like that just out of nowhere, right? Unless it was sales declining or whatever, which I don't think we have a problem with given the, C8 sales, right? But I don't really think you have a choice, right? I don't really think it matters anymore.
If
I
they
mean,
are committing to going fully carbon neutral by what 2040 and to have all electric vehicle production by 2035, there's no other place for it to go. But we're gonna see an electric Corvette,
except, yeah, it's
and I just
we'll see.
hope and pray again. If someone from GM is listening to this, first of all, thank you. Second of all, please feel free to hit us up podcast at redlineresorts.com. Third of all, um, please don't make it an SUV. Just don't make it a
Please.
crossover. Don't make it an SUV. Just
So it looks like GM is planning on it will apparently offer. Wow, I'm reading. I didn't read this article in entirety, but it sounds like it says here the same article. GM will offer 30 plans to offer, I guess, 30 all electric models worldwide by the middle of the decade. By the end of 2025, 40% of its US models will be battery electric vehicles. It plans to include crossovers, SUVs, sedans, and trucks in its electric vehicle lineup. That's a big.
now I know yeah, it's going to be really interesting seeing cuz you have to remember GM encompasses not just Chevy.
Oh yeah.
We've got Chevy, GMC, Cadillac, Buick. We've got their truck line.
Hmm.
In their commercial fleet, of which, you know,
Well, that's why the announcement of maybe in terms of not like the 30 cars might not be of the entire company is a big deal, frankly. I mean
right.
that's a lot of different brands and a lot of
Well,
different
and a lot of international brands as
markets.
well. We've got Holden in Australia. We've got I don't know what they're calling the brand now. Used to be Opal. I don't know if Opal's still the brand name over in the UK and
Neither
in
do I.
Europe, but it was Opal for a while. I mean, these are
I don't know, man.
this is a
Maybe these
significant
are
change.
changing
Yeah,
times.
it's a significant change to the market for
I
sure.
mean, even with that, we're seeing. I mean, another huge thing I think here on the chat, and maybe rope it in, is the in the U.S. The new Biden administration announced that I think I don't know if it was by a year, but they have plans to essentially take the entire government, vehicle fleet electric, which you were telling me is what 600 something thousand vehicles here for the in the U.S.
Yeah, I
Right?
have to double check the numbers, but essentially, if I'm understanding correctly, it could be around 600,000 vehicles. Um, Anything that is owned, operated, and is currently under a U.S. government license plate, excuse me, has been designated that it will be electric. Um, I'm not
Imagine
100%
the
sure of the time frame.
charging infrastructure.
That's a
I
lot
mean,
of electric vehicles, and that's a lot of take home cars for you know, but we're also not just talking take home cars. We're not talking oh, this secretary's aide,
mhm.
their whatever Chevy Aveo that they're taking home. We're also talking every single mail carrier vehicle,
Yeah,
including the semi trucks.
that's a big thing too. I mean, along the lines of the GM maybe there's something to be said that it's one thing to make an announcement in the future, but if with a entire government fleet as well as GM and big states like California are announcing it, maybe it's more so what you were saying a couple weeks ago that yeah, we might not have the exact technology ready or the charging infrastructure, but just because of the sheer speed and the number of players in the game, we'll actually see those advances much more quickly than we would otherwise. I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, I mean clearly, with the hybrid electric, supercars and F1, like clearly hybrid power is better than just straight out, might not be as fun or as good sounding, right, as pleasant to the ears or thrilling potentially, but you look at stuff like the P1, like I love the McLaren P1, and that's clearly the way, right? I mean, hybrid power. So I'm not saying that there's no room for electric, and I said before, when I can get the same kind of reliability and air conditioning, heater, radius, whatever, same range as like in a tank of gas right now from say a GM car or whatever, I'll buy them. Like I have no problem. I'm sure by then we'll have the charging figured out. Charging in home, charging around. I mean, I think the only question I would have at that point is the wait times. Though there is something to be said that you can just pull up to a gas or in the not in the U.S. I guess petrol station, fill up and go. But what does that mean? I've been wondering this in the past couple of days as I was seeing there was I think it was a TikTok video that someone had sent my way about a Tesla driver sharing like charging secrets and kind of how this person uses their Tesla, and I think it does require maybe a little bit more planning until the charging network kind of take over and there's a lot more infrastructure for charging. But will it create a shift in the way people drive? I'm wondering.
Well, and obviously anything.
In the way people live, even, right? I mean,
Well, right.
as when the internal combustion engine was made available on a mass scale, and then made affordable. I mean, gas was cheap; people could buy these cars, and then freedom was on the open road. And that's why I think one thing you and I like is when obviously when we both drive, we don't we driving for us is not point A to B. It's not four an engine and four wheels, right? It's pleasure. It's the thrill. I think clearly like your brother Zach, when he like with Shooting Cars YouTube channel and his passions, and it's for some people, driving is their passion. They enjoy it, and to a point, I think when cars were made available on a mass scale, that was freedom. I mean, what back 50 what late 40s 50s 60s and on, you had a car, you could do whatever you want, you can go wherever, freedom, and that was something special, that changed the
Yeah.
way America grew. It changed the way we lived, it changed the way we evolved, and maybe we'll see something like that. And I never really thought about it, frankly, in detail until now.
Yeah,
Maybe
and I'm looking back into the
same
original
thing.
article where I found a lot of this information. It's by Enrique Danz from Forbes. And so, yes, it has been confirmed 645,000 vehicles nationwide.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. And it is an executive order, so it is to be done ASAP. There's no set time limit on it
That's
right now, but that's ASAP. Now, obviously, we don't try to get political on this podcast.
Nope.
Obviously, when you're talking about a political figure such as the president, there's always a chance that politics come up.
Mm-hmm.
I know that what a lot of people are saying is this is a political ploy to get more jobs into the renewable energy industry since they know the infrastructure isn't there yet.
Mm-hmm.
So to move people and to create jobs from the oil sector that obviously would be getting taken away because right now, just in moving the U.S. government fleet of 645,000
645.
645,000 vehicles from gas power to electric power is essentially taking $70 billion away from
That's
the
a
oil
lot.
industry. Yeah,
Wow.
it says in the region of 70 billion. Now, the idea would be to transition all of those people over to creating, a sustainable electric grid that could power and charge these vehicles. But
Yeah.
we'll leave that to the politics to decide. Just a really
And the
interesting
engineers
point.
to figure it out.
Exactly.
It's a big shift. I think. Gotta be honest, I didn't expect to hear. I expected to hear news like this from maybe government figures or organizations or certain states here and there here in the U.S. But I didn't really think we'd see an announcement like this from a company like GM for
For
frankly quite a while.
Yeah, and that's well, I mean, I know Ford's been leaning more and more into the EV market. Obviously, Chevy made the big
Yeah,
push
Porsche.
initially to get into it. Porsche's been getting
Yeah.
into it.
But GM
Volkswagen,
just took the next step though. Like everyone's getting into it. They have electric cars. They keep talking about things they're going to develop and whatever. But I mean, as far as I'm aware, I don't think anyone else has really come out with an announcement like this outside of GM. Frankly,
at
do
least
you?
not here in the States. I know there's been
Yeah,
significant push overseas just with EU regulations, and the more electric cars you have, the more
yeah.
gas burners you can build and the more crazy builds you can have, which is why we saw, I believe we've talked about this in the past, but that's how you ended up with the Toyota i3 or the IQ, whatever it was, the
Mm-hmm.
Scion with an Aston Martin badge on it,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yep.
which was essentially just a Scion IQ with quilted leather seats and an Aston Martin badge. That being said, obviously Volkswagen is also making these steps.
Yeah. That's
Biggest
another thing I want to
thing,
talk about too. Yeah.
biggest thing is very recently this weekend, some of the initial ID3 electric vehicle VW sales numbers have come in, and it's already starting to catch up to and match Golf sales
That's a big deal.
in just the base model ID3. So in an
That's
apples to apples comparison,
wow.
the ID3, which is essentially an all electric Golf, it's a little different, but essentially it's the all electric Golf, for lack of a better term, is catching up and is slated to very quickly, once they release more than just the base model, overtake the Golf in sales. And the Golf, I mean, everybody knows of a Volkswagen Golf. The thing's been around since,
Mhm.
you know, as long as I can remember Volkswagen being around outside of the Beetle. So,
Yeah, and then it just goes no. I think rather to reinforce that maybe the time is now. I mean, maybe COVID and there's a lot of shifting things going on right now, and maybe something that a year ago we might have thought what was announcements and pushes were long off. Companies and people alike are reevaluating where they want to do and where their equity is going to be placed, right, and what they want to invest in. So
well, and we're
maybe the
seeing
time
that.
is now.
Yeah, we're seeing that as well with. I mean, take a look at at all the other things that VW are doing. The MEB electric platform in general, the electric catamaran, which was mind blowing to take a look at and kind of understand, a silent catamaran that can move ridiculously fast through the water. I mean,
Yeah.
we're seeing a lot of stuff out of VW as well. It's gonna be really interesting.
Yeah. I think another thing, maybe with the car market that I want to maybe if you could reference as well along, shifting tastes in markets and so on. We had talked about earlier on a previous episode about chip shortages, with
Yeah,
with shifting focuses from the consumer, chip manufacturers shifting their focuses from the automotive industry to consumer electronics. And that actually, maybe you can't go into full detail, but maybe you can just, for the listeners, talk about how, that's on a general basis hitting you, right? I think you were telling me, which is interesting. I want maybe have a review from
yeah.
a couple weeks
So,
ago.
um, in my day job, I deal with the three major American automotive manufacturers pretty closely. Ford, um, specifically brand names of Ford, Dodge, and Chevy. And one of the things in the past on Monday, um, I work specifically in the fleet division of these. Not I don't work for these brands, but I work with them in developing product and things like that. And one of the things that I saw was a lot of my customers were coming to me saying, "Hey, I got a notice from uh, my Chevy
Hmm.
dealership saying that I'm not getting my 21 Tahoe this year." And I was like, "Huh, that sounds really odd. I'm
Interesting.
not GM, so I can't tell them when they're getting their car." But I had a lot of people coming to me and going, um, "Why did I just get this notice? And maybe or maybe you can point me in the right direction of someone who knows what the heck is going on." But they're saying that they're not delivering any 2021 Tahoes and Suburbans to the fleet market this year. I'm like, that's not true. I know that's not true for a fact, but
That's a big thing to say, frankly. Yeah, that would
yeah.
be a big deal.
And what ultimately happened was they cut off order taking early. They were expecting to be able to take orders for 2021 vehicles, I believe, for quite a while yet. But they had to cut that off entirely on, I believe it was, what was it, Monday the 20. What was Monday's date? Yeah, it was
This
the
Monday?
25th. No, Monday the 25th. Early in the morning, they cut off all orders past a certain time. I want to say it was 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. We're not going to get delivered in 2021. You can still place an order for a 2021 Tahoe, but it won't be delivered until 2022. And when I finally got a chance to talk to the GM rep on the fleet side, um, and kind of some of the other people involved there, uh, multiple people said, "Hey, it's the chip shortage. We just can't get enough chips
Yeah.
to get these cars on the road." And it's not that GM wants to take less orders. It's not that they're trying to stiff people out of cars. Obviously, in the world
The
of
shortage is catching up with them.
Yeah, and in the world of fleet management with places like Enterprise, um, Hertz, the big rental companies that also lease a lot of these vehicles out to government agencies as runaround cars for the city, or um, on the truck side, you see a lot of that with truck body companies and things like that. It's extremely interesting knowing that this chip shortage is actually affecting me personally. It's something we talked
I
about on
gotta
this
be honest, as
podcast.
we talked about it, I think we were talking about it. Maybe it was just me thinking, it was something that we're gonna see, something I'll read about, something I'll hear about, not thinking it would, pseudo affect my life, anytime soon. And I know I'm not you, obviously, but I think what I mean by that is it's a little, closer and a little close to home. It sounds like, especially for you, obviously, over here for me, but also a heck of a lot sooner hitting, a little closer than I thought it might be, frankly. I didn't think this would be a thing we would even, as consumers in general,
Well, and
experience for a
and
while.
the concern is multiple reports are coming out now from a lot of different places that this chip shortage is not going to be a short-term thing. This is not going to be a 2021 thing. This is not going to be a 2021 into 2022 thing. This could potentially last until 2035, 2040 that we have chip
Wow.
shortages. And the consumer market is always going to take precedence over the fleet market in essentially where I'm
Yeah.
working, but it's interesting to see how much of where's the balance going to be, how much of each thing is going to, or how much of the fleet market, because fleet vehicles make up a significant number of the market.
Hmm.
Technically every rental car, at least in where we're based out of in the state of Illinois, is considered a fleet vehicle. They are
Hmm.
in Colorado, they are in most other places. I mean, it's a significant number of vehicles, and if they can't be delivering fleet, uh, that's a huge segment of the market that's going to suffer.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's things are so interesting right now. If you just gotta, I mean, that's why I think why, I hope that we can provide a little bit of that service to people, is, things that we see, things that we think are interesting, and, things that happen to us, or catch our eye. Maybe we can, help bring a whole lot of information more to other, to people, frankly, because I think we find it interesting. And yeah,
Also,
it's a new world.
it wouldn't be without my due diligence to say, if you are a Chevy customer and you are a Chevy fleet customer, um, no, it's not that Chevy has stopped taking orders or that they're not delivering your car. It's coming. It Just check with your dealership. The email that went out to the dealerships explaining the situation was, um, from what I'm understanding, a little, very easy to be misconstrued and a little complicated. Just as a rundown, it was a last minute thing because they didn't realize that the chip shortage was going to hit as fast as they did. And
Yep.
that's not Chevy's fault. That's not anybody's fault. It
It's
There's
just
just
how the cookie crumbles, frankly. It's just how all the chips are falling right
and
now, right? I mean,
literally, but
that's funny.
yeah, you saw
I
me
didn't
do that.
realize I didn't
Um,
connect those dots until give me 5 seconds.
yeah, it's
That's funny.
more or less it's gonna affect everyone. It's already affecting
Yeah.
a lot of the European brands. We're already seeing significant changes, and that's why a lot of these chips are used as engine control modules for
Hmm.
ICMs, or um, internal combustion motors, or ICEs. I prefer to use ICM just because ICE stands for something completely different here in the States. But um, these ICMs, it's it's not a chip that you need when you have an electric vehicle, which is why I think there's going to be a huge push for electric vehicles.
Oh.
A lot of these engine management
Hmm.
control units, these ECMs that these chipsets are reliant, or that the engine control module is reliant on this chip, and with these chip shortages,
Yeah.
it's going to be Essentially,
We'll see.
a big push for the electric market.
Those years, what you said, 2035, 2040, and GM going electric by 2035. I mean, I'm not saying it's coincidence, but yeah, maybe. Hey, changing markets, and I think we're all in a world now. Not even anything automotive related. Anything quote with an engine or everything is kind of up in the air right now. But I
Yeah,
mean, as we see news evolve over the world. I mean, if it's one thing, we're all in this literally ever changing world, maybe so than in a long time, together based on the past year. So we'll have to see what happens, obviously. And as we see stuff, we'll make sure to, you know, talk about it and give you guys our opinions.
absolutely.
With that, I think there's one more thing that I wanted to talk about, maybe on a little bit of a more of a fun note. I want to talk about something general. And as I like to peruse, I really do like Jalopnik. I like the site. There's tons of articles that I just find super interesting, frankly, on there. And there was one that was written, I think, yesterday by Elizabeth Blackstock that got me thinking, frankly. And the title was, quote, "What's one thing you won't compromise on in a car?" And it got me thinking on that exact point, like new car, rental car, like in general, and just a car, right? Means of transportation. What's one thing that is an immediate deal breaker that is you absolutely have to have something you would not compromise on? I think
Mm.
that's an interesting thing to think about,
You
frankly.
see, the thing is, I feel like there are so many. It's hard to narrow it down to one.
See, that's what I thought originally. I thought, based on what I've driven and not, I mean, you could think of like, one thing for me that I noticed in some of the new cars I've driven is transmission feel and how it shifts. Like for example, the way that my dad had what was it, a 20, I want to say like 2018, 2017 Explorer, Ford Explorer, and I hated the way that transmission shifted. I really did. It always felt like it would hold to like 3,000 and hold first or second gear forever until it shifted, and I hated it, frankly. It was so annoying when I had to drive that car. And I have things like that, or big comfortable seats, throttle response, really, like speakers. I like listening to music in the car or podcasts and things like that. Hey, listen to the RLR podcast when you're driving in the car. Make sure you pay attention to all road signals and stay safe while you're driving. But to that point, yes, I think it's hard, but I think I have mine, frankly. I thought a lot about this, and I went back and forth between transmissions and engines and, you know, engine sound, driving feel, even like a sunroof or a moonroof at one point. And I think I would be willing, even if the seat wasn't as comfortable as it could be, that was my number two, comfortable seats, for maybe long distance driving or whatever. I have my one though. I think when you really think about it, there's one that'll stick out, and for me, it's bright, but maybe more specifically LED headlights. I have
Mm.
driven a lot of cars over my life, both new and old, classic cars and new cars, expensive cars and cheap cars, and even new cars that have old fashioned headlights and old cars that have LED headlights, like my own, right? And one thing I've noticed is that is a deal breaker for me, frankly. I have to have LED headlights. I have to have bright headlights because, frankly, good old fashioned halogen headlights or quote unquote anything other than LED, yeah, sometimes they could be blinding or whatever. There's wiggle room in there. I can't stand when I'm driving at night and I can't see, or in the rain or in the snow, especially now. One thing is, me, Nick, is that I love driving, right? And I
Hmm.
really do like driving at night, and I don't know why. I just enjoy it's kind of peaceful and even more tranquil than, even a day drive could be for me. And I'm fortunate that my car has LED headlights. And they really, for me, make a difference. I can't stand when I can't see the road when I don't have LED headlights shining my way through. And for me, that is my number one deal breaker. That's something I will not compromise on, period. To the point where I just rented a car not too long ago, and I legitimately upcharged. I paid more for a bigger sedan than what I needed just so I could have the LED headlight. To be honest,
Hmm.
I I can't stand it. It's a pet peeve when driving. So that's mine, frankly. That's something I won't compromise on. LED or bright headlights, frankly.
That's really interesting. um,
Isn't it though? It's an interesting thing to think
well,
about. Maybe.
and because I also, as part of my job, I also drive a fleet vehicle.
Hmm.
Most fleet vehicles still have not gone to LED headlights,
Hmm.
and I don't have LED headlights. I have extremely bright LED fog lights that are factory on that car.
Hmm.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's no secret. We've talked about it before. I drive a Durango,
Yep.
um, but I do
Quite
not
cool.
have the LED headlights. They're the standard fleet halogen headlights with really bright dual pod fog LED.
I can attest to
Or
that. The first time, when you had the car was relatively new, I think I remember even saying that I thought it was weird that you had LED fog lights, but not LED headlights. Frankly, in a new gen car, and frankly, my mom got a new up like a not the highest trim, but one of the highest trim models for I think the Nissan Rogue is it last year model 2020. And the weird thing is her car doesn't have LED headlights, nor does it even have fog lights though. I'm not sure if that's a additional add-on or
hmm.
a package thing, but that was interesting to me. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. Some drivers might not think often about it, but I do. Like, frankly, it's weird. Every
Well,
time
and
I
it's
drive at
one of those
night,
things. It's once you have it, it's hard to go back.
that could be it, Frank. I've always had it.
And
That
it's
could be a
not a
thing.
deal breaker for me. You know what? Moving forward in my life, it probably will be, but
Hmm.
not not
As
for
of
work
right now, though,
reasons, but for personal reasons. I think the big one for me is going to be
what won't you compromise on?
it's tough because there's four things that come to mind right now.
Okay.
And maybe we can talk through this as part of the podcast, but I really like Android Auto. I have an Android phone.
Okay.
I really like Android Auto. I really like when it's hard to describe, but it, one of the things is having the ability to like not just change the driving mode where it like changes certain things, but like where you can actually feel the drive mode change.
Hmm.
Um, I
Okay.
like I do like that. That's not a deal breaker though.
I feel
Um,
like you might be a little bit spoiled in what you're currently driving with
that
that, though.
that might be true, but Dodge does a really fantastic job of building their sport modes, especially on the top end. I've got the Hemi and all-wheel drive in my Durango, and it does make a difference there. Um, and it's a physical difference that you can feel. But even so, that's not necessarily one of them. I would say that I would never ever buy a car that has the auto stop start. That is the most annoying thing that has ever
Well,
come
given the way
across.
things are,
I understand that it's one thing.
might
It's
not be
one
able to get
thing
away.
because I have driven an electric vehicle. I drove what was it? Chevy's new the Bolt, the small one.
Hmm.
And if that had a quote unquote auto stop start, you wouldn't be able to tell because there's really no noise
Hmm.
in the first
Yeah.
place. That I could understand. The one thing I can't get past is the auto stop start. And if it
Hey,
does
there
if
may
it
be a time here where we don't even have to turn that off anymore, frankly, the way things are going. Because
well,
not even a lot of cars, I think, have buttons or ways to do it, but I foresee not being even able to turn that off in the future.
if that's
But
the case,
I agree with you, frankly. You know that.
Yeah, if that's the case,
I
then
can.
I'm going back and I'm buying a 2011 Ford Crown Victoria, and I am just making that thing last for as long as humanly possible, because there are so many parts, with it being the number one police car used in all of the United States and Canada and Mexico for however many years. There are parts everywhere for that thing, and it is a solid body on platform,
Mm-hmm.
you
It,
know, real well put together
it's
car.
a tank.
It is a rolling tank. That thing will go through pretty much anything you put it through. It does not have auto
So in
stop start.
terms of the compromise, though, you named three things in respect to like the auto start stop and like how you want to switch to potentially a ground vehicle the way things go. What's the fourth one? You said there were four.
Yeah, so I've got auto stop start. I've got essentially drive modes. Android Auto is a big one, but
Mm-hmm.
quite honestly, I've driven a lot of cars with real bad cup holders.
Huh.
Real bad cup holders.
Interesting.
Um, and I
Interesting.
know, Zach, we've had him on the podcast. My brother's shooting cars on YouTube. I know he's doing the new one, the new segment,
I
the big friggin' bottle test.
think it's
I
I think it's
I
hilarious.
really hope that someone reaches out to him, and gets him some kind of sponsorship with big friggin' bottles. That's not a brand name. That's just what he came up with. But he has a very large water bottle that he's been bringing on his reviews lately, and he's been doing the big friggin' bottle test. And I will say, it really does make a difference in my line of work, where I'm driving constantly during a
Mm-hmm.
non-pandemic time. Um, not just for, I want to be able to put this big gulp from Quick
But I
Trip
mean, but it
or.
matters though. Like I think I know where you're going. One of my favorite water bottles, not sponsored in any way. In any way, just I personally enjoy them, and the or what are I think the hydro flasks, the 32
Hmm.
ounce hydro flasks, and those don't
or
even fit in a lot of places, and it's
or
annoying.
from when Zach and I went to the Porsche experience. I know Porsche, it has to come up at every single
Every
podcast.
episode, it has to.
Um, at this point, it's just tradition. Um, but one of the things they gave me, one of the best things they gave me from that event, was a Porsche branded Corksicle. I don't know if you've
Mm,
heard of the brand Corksicle,
yeah,
but
quality. Yeah. Oh yeah, I used to have one in. That was like my go-to water bottle, and was a Corksicle water bottle. Yeah.
yeah, this is a Corksicle. It's kind of like a tumbler, or it almost looks like a martini shaker, to be honest with you. But it is. I've
I
got.
know which one. I had a version of. I know what you're talking about.
Well, and you've seen me carrying
Yeah.
mine around. I mean, it is absolutely fantastic. It is one of the best water bottles I've ever had. It's very sustainable. I didn't even realize what it was until I got home and I unpacked that bag of all the goodies, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, that's a nice water bottle. And I set it down and I don't know, it was 2 weeks later or something, and I was drinking out of it. And someone goes, oh, getting fancy over here with the Corksicle. I was like, what's Corksicle? And they're like, did you not know when you bought that? And I'm like, I didn't buy this. This was a gift from Porsche when I went to their event. And they're like, whoa, they're handing out Corksicles? And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, okay. So these are essentially top of the line
I
water
didn't
bottles.
realize that they were that big of a deal, frankly, but until today. But I mean,
Um,
very quality water bottles. But I mean,
extremely
that's a good
quality.
point.
But yeah, I
Does that
mean,
one fit in cup holders in your
see, that's the
experience?
thing, is it's about the same size as Zach's big friggin' bottle. And
So it generally doesn't fit.
some of them
So would
don't
that be your
fit.
number one though? Of those four, do you have a one? Would that be your one? Because I get it too. Like I like to drink water when I'm on long drives, especially when I go like up north, and I always tend to have to bring like but individual
If I'm not
bottles of
drinking
water
water,
just to fit in the cup
or
holders.
if I'm not drinking water or something like hydration wise, Gatorade, something, while I'm driving and I'm doing long distance drives, by the end of that drive, I'm so exhausted and I have such a bad headache. I have to keep myself hydrated. So
Yep.
I would say that that's probably one of them.
Do you have a
Um,
one though of those four? Or do
That's
you have four things you won't compromise on?
no, mm, I want to narrow it down to just one, and maybe I have to think about it this week, and or
Yeah,
actually over the next 2 weeks, as Matt will explain shortly. But
yeah, I think then I think that might be a good place to end here then, because I think that's last for me to talk about. And yeah,
I'll have to give
maybe
my
we'll
answer.
return
I'll
next.
have to think about that, and maybe we'll start the next podcast with my findings here.
Yeah, I think it's a good place to end this week's episode. Maybe what Nick is alluding to here is we have some prior engagements for next weekend, next Sunday, or was it next Monday? We record on Sundays generally, so there will not be an episode for next week. We will return in a couple weeks' time, not the following week, but the next after that. And Nick can fill us in on what his number one thing he won't compromise in the car, compromise on in a car.
Yeah, I've got a little while to think about it. In fact, I've got
Yeah.
a rollover on the tick of my life clock to think about it. So I'm alluding to my birthday next week, which is part of the prior engagements. There's a whole list, but that's one of them as to why we
There's a
can't.
whole bunch. We tried to we talked about how to make it true. Logistically, it's just not going to work for us to record an episode. So we will return in a couple of weeks' time. The week after, we'll have another good episode for everybody listening with some brand new content and topics. So, with that, is anything else, Nick, you wanted to bring up for this week?
Not really at this time. I think I've got a lot of thinking to do, obviously, and um, I'm
Nothing
sure.
about the important.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll come back with some interesting topics to talk about more than anything. So
Yeah.
we'll record the next one on Valentine's Day.
Oh, didn't even notice that, but cool. So we'll see you guys. We'll see you guys shortly after that. With that, brings us to the checkered flag this week. We both of us hope everyone has very much enjoyed another episode of the RLR podcast. And for those with our tuning in via our video on YouTube, our video audience, we hope you enjoyed that as well. If you guys have any questions, you have any feedback, feel free to reach out to us. Again, our social media handles on all platforms is at Redline Resorts, as well as always our podcast, our email, which is podcast at redlineresorts.com. With that for this week, I'm Matt, and that's Nick, and we will see you guys here very soon. Stay safe and take care, everyone.